The wind came first. Not strong. It's not loud. Just cold. It slipped through the wooden walls. Through the cracks in the roof. Across the concrete floor. Men woke up shivering. Someone coughed in the darkness. Another man whispered, "Is the stove out?" It was. The coal bin was empty. Outside, boots crunched on frozen ground. But the guards said nothing. Inside the barrack, breath turned into fog. Blankets felt thin. Metal cups burned cold against the skin. By morning, the water bucket was frozen solid. No warning. No extra supplies. No winter issue. And that was the moment they realized something was wrong. Winter had arrived. But the camp was not ready. And before the season ended, the prisoners would build a system no one had planned. A system made from scraps. From risk. From quiet decisions made after dark. But one question remained. Was the cold an accident? Or had someone known it was coming? The year was late 1944. The location, a large Allied prisoner of war camp somewhere in Northern Europe. The war was still active. Supply lines were stretched. Transport routes were unreliable. The camp held thousands of German prisoners. Officially, conditions followed international rules. Food arrived weekly. Coal deliveries were scheduled. Medical inspections were routine. On paper, everything worked. But that autumn, small changes began. One week, the coal shipment arrived late. The next week, it arrived smaller. Then a delivery wagon came half empty. No explanation. The guards seemed tense. One evening, a transport officer argued quietly near the gate. A clerk removed several pages from a ledger. And one morning, a prisoner working near the storage yard noticed something strange. The winter supply crates weren't there. Had they been delayed? Or never sent at all? Among the prisoners was a former railway engineer named Carl Weiss. He kept notes. Not official notes. Just observations. Weather changes. Delivery schedules. Camp routines. He noticed patterns. And the pattern worried him. Another prisoner, Otto, had worked in construction before the war. He inspected the barracks. Gaps in the walls. Loose boards. Thin roofing. These weren't built for winter, he whispered. Meanwhile, a small group worked in the kitchen. They counted fuel daily. Each day less coal. Each day colder mornings. Then one night, a kitchen worker returned from the storage shed. He spoke quietly. The reserve pile is gone. Used, moved, or taken somewhere else. No one knew. And no one was answering questions. The first frost came early. Then another. Then snow. Inside the barracks, men began sleeping closer together. Blankets were shared. Windows were covered with paper. Still, the wind found its way in. The stove burned only a few hours each day. At night, the temperature dropped sharply. Boots froze stiff. Water froze in cups. One morning, the camp loudspeaker made an announcement. Coal will be rationed. No timeline. No replacement plan. That same afternoon, Carl saw guards loading crates onto a truck. Not coal. Wood scraps. Broken pallets. Old fencing. Why were they collecting wood? And where were they taking it? Something was changing. And winter had only begun. The cold wave arrived suddenly. Temperatures dropped far below freezing. The stoves stopped completely. No coal remained. Inside the barracks, men wrapped towels around their hands to sleep. Some stayed awake just to keep moving. Breathing hurt. Metal touched skin like ice. The kitchen fires struggled to stay lit. Water lines froze. Food portions became cold before they could be eaten. Then the first emergency meeting was called by the prisoners themselves. If they waited for supplies, winter would win. So they began a plan. Small teams went to the yard. Every piece of wood was collected. Crates, boxes, broken furniture. Even wooden bed frames were shortened to create fuel. At night, another team worked on insulation. Strips of cloth were packed into wall cracks. Cardboard was layered inside windows. Blankets were hung like barriers. One group started something unexpected. They dug, not tunnels for escape, but shallow trenches around the barracks. Wind barriers. Anything to slow the cold air. Still, one question remained. Why had no official winter delivery arrived? Eventually, camp authorities responded. But their actions raised more questions. Instead of coal shipments, they approved prisoner work details. Wood collection teams were sent outside the perimeter. Under guard, prisoners gathered fallen branches from nearby forests. Why approve this instead of supplying fuel? A transport officer visited the camp. He stayed only 1 hour. After he left, the camp commander ordered stricter rationing. No explanation. Meanwhile, Carl noticed something in the records office. Several supply entries were marked as redirected. Redirected where? To another camp? To the front lines? Or had the shipments never existed? No one could confirm it. And no official report was ever shown to the prisoners. Spring eventually came. But the records did not. When historians later examined archived camp documents, something stood out immediately. Pages were missing. Not burned. Not destroyed. Simply removed. Supply ledgers ended in early autumn. Transport confirmations stopped. Coal shipment numbers were listed, but without signatures. And in the margin of one page, a single word appeared. Redirected. Redirected where? That word became the center of debate. And over the years, 4 main theories emerged. Late 1944 was chaos across Europe. Railway networks were damaged. Fuel depots were targeted. Transport trains were delayed for weeks. Historians supporting this theory argue the explanation is simple. The coal never arrived. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't secrecy. It was breakdown. Winter shipments were scheduled. But trains carrying fuel were rerouted or destroyed. Paperwork continued as if deliveries were expected, because officials assumed they would eventually arrive. But here the problem. Nearby POW camps reported receiving at least partial winter shipments. Reduced, yes. Delayed, yes. But not completely absent. So why did this particular camp face near total shortage? Was it location? Was it timing? Or something else? And then there's the transport officer's brief visit. If the issue was purely logistical, why stay only 1 hour? Why leave without explanation? The supply collapse theory explains the cold. But it doesn't explain the silence. Another possibility is far more calculated. By late 1944, military needs were desperate. Frontline units required heating fuel. Armored divisions required lubrication oil. Hospitals required energy. Some historians believe camp coal shipments were deliberately diverted to active combat zones. If so, it would not have been unusual. Military priority often overrode prisoner supply needs. Documents from other regions show emergency reallocations. But here is where it becomes unclear. If the coal was officially diverted, there should be transfer records. There should be receiving signatures. There should be destination logs. Instead, those columns are blank. Even more interesting, a handwritten note in one partial archive mentioned: winter allocation adjusted, no escalation required. No escalation required. That suggests the shortage was anticipated. Planned. Accepted. But by whom? And why was there no protest recorded by the camp administration? Unless they already knew. Sometimes history isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's paperwork. Lost forms. Delayed signatures. Misfiled approvals. One research team proposed a simpler explanation. The winter supply request was submitted late. The approval was delayed. Transport clearance was never finalized. By the time the error was discovered, the fuel had been reassigned elsewhere. No conspiracy. No intention. Just bureaucracy. There is evidence supporting this. One archived requisition form was dated only days before the first frost. Unusually late for winter planning. And the signature line was incomplete. But if it was only incompetence, why did officials allow prisoners to organize wood-gathering operations so quickly? Why approve external collection teams instead of waiting for corrected deliveries? Administrative failure explains delay. But it does not explain preparedness for improvisation. Someone reacted too fast. As if they expected the problem. This final theory is the most debated. And the most unsettling. Some historians argue that camp leadership knew winter deliveries would be insufficient, weeks in advance. But instead of reporting a crisis, they chose containment. Why? Because reporting shortages could trigger inspections. Inspections could trigger blame. Blame during wartime was dangerous. So rather than escalate, officials may have allowed prisoners to adapt. Notice the pattern. Wood collection was permitted. Barrack modifications were tolerated. Fuel rationing was introduced early. Even trench digging around buildings was not punished. These were not random acts. They were quietly allowed. Almost encouraged. If this theory is true, then the cold was not an accident. It was a managed risk. A silent calculation. But here's the part no one can confirm. There are no surviving memos explaining this choice. No written acknowledgement. Only absence. And absence in historical research can mean many things. Lost paper. Destroyed evidence. Or deliberate omission. Every camp was required to submit seasonal condition reports. Food status. Fuel inventory. Medical summaries. The winter report for this camp does not exist. Autumn, yes. Spring, yes. Winter, missing. Was it never written? Was it lost in transport? Or removed later? One archivist noted something unusual. The document numbering skips exactly one file. One file. Right where winter would have been. Coincidence? Or correction? We may never know. Was it chaos? Military diversion? Bureaucratic delay? Or quiet strategic silence? Each explanation fits part of the puzzle. But none explain everything. And perhaps that is why the story remains compelling. Because the men in the barracks never knew the reason. They only felt the cold. They only saw the empty coal bin. They only heard the wind through the cracks. And maybe that's the real answer. Sometimes history doesn't leave us certainty. Only fragments. Only margins. Only a single word written beside a missing shipment. Redirected. Redirected where? The records never say. What do you think happened? Let me know your theory below. By the time the snow began to melt, the camp looked different. Not destroyed, not abandoned, but altered. The wind no longer cut through open cracks. The walls were thicker now, layered with cloth, cardboard, and salvaged wood. Barrack doors closed tighter. Windows were smaller. Everything had been adjusted by hand. Not by design, but by necessity. When the first supply wagon of spring rolled through the gate, few men reacted. No cheers. No applause. Just quiet watching. Coal was unloaded. Stacked. Counted. As if it had never been missing. And that silence felt heavier than the cold ever had. Because no announcement was made. No explanation offered. Winter had nearly broken the camp, and no one officially admitted it. Carl closed his small notebook on the final page of that season. The ink was lighter than usual. His hands had shaken while writing. The last winter entry read, "We adapted faster than the deliveries." That sentence says everything. They did not wait to be saved. They reorganized fuel, rebuilt walls, shortened beds for firewood, created wind trenches, formed insulation teams, shared body heat. A system built quietly, carefully, almost invisibly. And when spring came, the official records resumed as if nothing unusual had happened. Coal delivered. Rations stable. Camp condition normal. But the wood stacks told another story. The shortened bunks told another story. The patched roofs told another story. And the missing supply pages told perhaps the biggest story of all. Because historians later noticed something strange. The winter quarter records were incomplete. Several entries were marked redirected. Others simply ended midline. Why? Was it wartime chaos? Administrative error? Or a decision that was never meant to be documented? We may never know. But here is what we do know. Winter did arrive without warning. Fuel did run out. And survival did not come from orders. It came from adaptation. From observation. From leadership that wasn't official. From prisoners who refused to freeze while waiting for paperwork. The cold months revealed something deeper than hardship. They revealed how fragile systems can be. And how strong people can become when those systems fail. Now think back to the beginning. The frozen water bucket. The silent guards. The empty coal bin. Was it simply bad timing? Or had someone known winter supplies would not arrive and chosen silence over alarm? That question still lingers. And maybe that is why this story matters. Because sometimes the most important survival stories are not about dramatic escapes. They are about quiet endurance. About rebuilding what should have already been there. About surviving a season that no one prepared for. If you believe it was wartime chaos, tell us why. If you think it was mismanagement, share your reasoning. And if you believe there is a fourth explanation we haven't considered, write it below. Your theory might connect pieces historians missed. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. The next untold story begins. Where the official records fall silent,